All right. Thanks to the House to House, Heart to Heart, they, when going through their School of Evangelism, when you finish that program, they provide you with a lot of information. And they actually produce the teaching points for this lesson that we're going to be looking at, so it helps us to walk through and pull out the evangelistic ideas from this text. So there's a lot of work that's already gone into this, and they've done a really good job with it. Of course, we know that Rob Whitaker and that group, they're heavily focused on evangelism. They do this every single day, constantly. It's always on their minds, and they do a very good job at it. So there's good things that we'll discuss as we begin to work through this text. But let's go ahead and start by reading John chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. If someone would, please read John chapter 4, verses 1 through 10.
Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealing with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God, and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water."
Thank you, brother. Man, such a good, strong voice. Appreciate that, Ben. We're all very familiar with this text. We're very familiar with the scene, right? Jesus, he is continuing in his ministry, and he is now on the move. He has left Judea. He has departed to Galilee, and it's specific in the text to say that he needed to go in this direction, and he's going to the Samaritans. Now, one of the themes, or at least one of the things that stands out within this text is when you start realizing we're talking about the Jews and the Gentiles, or the Jews and the Samaritans, you immediately realize that there's been this long-standing barrier that stands between them because of dislike, because of one looking at the other as if they're less than, as if they're dogs, something of that nature. And there's been this constant cultural divide between the two, but nonetheless, Jesus and his purpose, he realizes, guess what? They need the gospel just the same as anybody else. They need my teaching just the same as anybody else. So, one of the themes that we'll kind of keep in our minds as we think about this and walk through this text, looking at how Jesus himself is sowing seed, we always need to be asking in the back of our own minds, are we truly sowing seed also? I mean, what did Jesus come to do? Save souls. Seek and save that which is lost. Right? That's a core responsibility of the church today, to keep the church growing rather than declining. So we need to keep it in our minds. And the purpose of the lesson, I suppose, is to learn about evangelism by studying the life of the master evangelist. Right? That's what we're going to be thinking about as we go through this text, how Jesus himself did this. But let's talk a little bit just to kind of introduce some of these things and kind of begin by stating the obvious as it pertains to our own communities, as it pertains to our own state, as it pertains to our own country. When you think about the problem, the core problem that our country faces, that our people face, our problems are not going to be solved from Washington, D.C. Our true deep core problems are not going to be solved by a president. It's not going to be solved by Congress. It's not going to be solved by our local law enforcement. It's not going to be solved by our judicial system. It's not going to be solved by the courthouse here in town. They cannot heal our sin problem. That's something that only the gospel of Jesus Christ can heal, and it's something that we have to be willing to share with other people to make a difference in the world around us. The Church of Christ, statistically speaking, is shrinking constantly in America, in our own state, in our own town. It continues to go on the decline. And we have to be willing to really step up to try and make a difference to turn that trend around. I found this interesting in some of these, in some of this information that was put together by House to House. They said if a doctor walked into an emergency room and saw a patient who looked like the Church of Christ, he would immediately yell, "Stat! We're losing him. We're losing our patient. He's dying." Right? It would be an emergency in their own minds, and they would think that we need to do something immediately. And through some of the research that they have done, they actually show that the churches of Christ across America are on a 3 to 5% decline every single year. 3 to 5%. Churches of Christ are shrinking. They're fading. And it's up to the churches of Christ, the people, to get involved and turn that trend around and actually make a difference to continue to grow the church. And we have more and more people who know not personal Bible study. We have more and more children who have never seen their father or their mother lead a Bible study. So it's a trend now produced even to the next generation. If they're not seeing it, we can't expect them to do it themselves. And we have to make sure we step up and put it to practice in our lives so that the younger generation sees us working hard at this so that they will desire the same work. We have to be willing to put it to practice. Sadly, this decline, sadly, the lack of, children seeing their parents being involved in evangelism, it's not because we do not have a remedy. It's not because we do not have an answer to the problem, but more so, it's simply because congregations, the church, has lost their focus on evangelism. We don't put forth the effort that they did in days past. And it shows, it reflects in the overall number of the church in America or in our own state. And it's not to try and say, okay, well, it's not an effort here to browbeat or anything like that. It's just stating the facts, stating the truth. And it's something we need to be serious about, and it's something that we need to get heavily involved in. If we're going to learn, then we need to go back to the master evangelist himself. The title they placed with this, Jesus, the politically incorrect evangelist. And it might even sound strange to just have Jesus and incorrect in the same sentence, but they provide a little bit of explanation. The title of this lesson is actually a play on words. And the phrase politically incorrect, when used as an adjective, it means this: not avoiding language or behavior that could offend a particular group of people. All right, so in an adjective form, Merriam-Webster says the definition of being politically incorrect is not avoiding language or behavior that would cause offense or would offend someone or a particular group of people. Think about some of the words of Jesus. Serpents, brood of vipers, how can you escape the condemnation of hell? All right, if anybody was willing to say things that were controversial, if anybody was willing to say the things that needed to be said, it was Jesus himself. Now, he did so in love, right? He had people's best interest in his heart when it came to these people, but he was willing to go against cultural norms. Text in point. He was willing to go to Samaria. He was willing to go to a people who needed the word. There's no doubt that Jesus would fit the definition of politically incorrect. And we have to ask ourselves today, are we willing to be politically incorrect and tell people what they need to hear that saves their souls? Right? That's the challenge that's before us. Jesus was a revolutionary, and his message was designed to change the status quo, and his weapon of choice was unlike those used in war today. Somebody read for us Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 17. We know this verse. We understand what it was that Jesus used as he waged war, spiritual warfare. We understand the weapon of choice. Ephesians 6 and verse 17.
Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God.
The Word of God, right? That was his weapon That was his choice weapon in the war that he waged in the spiritual warfare. Jesus was skilled with the use of the word. He was the master evangelist. And here's one of the things that makes it challenging for us. Jesus knew the hearts of people. So it made it a lot easier for him to know exactly what to say at exactly the right time in every given circumstance. We don't have that luxury. But the more that we get to know people and the more that we get involved with people, the better chance we have of knowing when to say the right things and saying them at the right time. But it takes us being willing to produce those friendships. But I think we can all say without a shadow of a doubt that there's no one that has ever lived who has cared more about sinners than our Lord Jesus Christ. And he embodied the perfect characteristics of soul saving. So if we're going to learn from anyone, who else to learn from than the best? Jesus himself, right? In evangelism. John 4 is one of the, if you would like to say it this way, most politically incorrect chapters in the Bible. Because if you're being honest with the text and what takes place and where Jesus goes and who he communicates with, then you immediately realize that it's a violation of religious, racial, social, cultural, moral, and national norms of the time. But it didn't stop him. He was willing to go because they needed to hear the things that he had to say. And if we're willing to study his practice, his pattern, then we can effectively reach the lost just the same. All right, so let's go back to verses 1 through 4. Verses 1 through 4. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria. One of the first points we can pull from this in thinking about evangelism is this: Jesus did not let culture close doors to souls. It was not going to allow this to be a barrier. It was not going to allow this to stand between him and the person that he wanted to speak to. And when you think about it, the language, when you hear this, he needed to go, right? This was something that was very important. There was purpose in this. And it's not the language of some vacationer saying, okay, well, this is my next destination. This is my next place where I'm going to sightsee. No, this was something he needed to do because he needed to speak to them about his truth. And if we want to be like Jesus, then our going needs to be purposed. Somebody read for us Luke chapter 19 and verse 10. Luke chapter 19 and verse 10, we need to have purpose in what we're doing. Luke 19 and verse 10.
For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost.
Purpose, right? Why did he go to Samaria? Souls. It was all purposed. It was intentional. There was a reason behind this. The text is very clear. This is something that he needed to do. We think about it today for ourselves, and we have to realize, look, evangelism, it's not some urge, right? It's not simply a bullet point in a lesson that we hear here between these four walls, or some main point in a sermon that we hear from the pulpit. This is something that needs to be purposed in our own lives just the same. Johnny?
He knew who needed him. He went where he was needed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It didn't, to this point here, he did not allow this cultural divide to keep him from going where he needed to be. And, when you get further into the text, what was the response of his disciples when they realized what he's doing? He's talking to a Samaritan. They couldn't believe it. They were shocked. They were surprised that he was speaking to this Samaritan woman. Listen, if we're really going to be evangelists, if we're really going to take to heart the responsibility of the church today, there's not anything that's going to stand between us and another person. There's not anything that we could look at that person and say, you know what, no, I don't know about that one. Or look at this group of people and say, I don't know about that. That's not the answer, right? Everybody needs to receive the message that Jesus has to offer. There should be nothing that would deter or distract us from that mission. Behind the word needed in our text here is something much deeper than the resistance of the Pharisees or geographical considerations. The target of Jesus' mission was Samaria. He had a purpose in this. The remnant that was left over from the wicked northern kingdom, if you remember when the northern kingdom was destroyed by the Assyrians, the Jews who were left intermarried with these non-Jewish people, and they became this mixed group of people called the Samaritans. Well, even as we mentioned earlier, how did the Jews feel about the Samaritans? Didn't like them, didn't care nothing for them. And it was so strong of a dislike, even maybe to the point some would present it as hatred, the way they spoke of them, the way they treated them, that they would do anything within their power to make sure that they could avoid, even if it meant traveling more distance. And think about travel in those days. If they had to travel further simply to avoid going through Samaria, they would have done it. Jesus says we're going right through the heart of it. We're going to be right in the middle of it because I have a purpose and we have a responsibility to the people just the same. Prejudice is a terrible problem in almost every society, but it becomes an eternal stumbling block when we allow it to stand between us and another person and their soul. Skin color, culture, location, where you come from, what your background is, none of these things should matter when it comes to reaching somebody with the gospel. Everybody needs to receive it just the same. Our scope of teaching is to all nations, to every creation, and any conscious effort to withhold the gospel to any prejudice, quite frankly, is repulsive. And it shouldn't be seen in the churches of Christ. We should be willing to go beyond those cultural divides. Yes, sir.
Galatians 3:28. For as many of you were baptized into the cross and put on Christ. Therefore, neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Amen.
This is referring to the church itself, but that how did they get to the church? They were evangelized. So this means that there was no division between the Jew who would go to the Greek or vice versa, or to the free to the slave. There's no difference in socioeconomic status. Whatever barrier man may create, that's a man-made barrier.
Right.
That we have done ourselves, not
Yeah.
what God has placed between us. Because there is no division. God is no respecter of men, right?
Right.
So therefore, anything we've done ourselves, and we're to reach out to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if we're honest with ourselves, there's probably been a time, probably more than once, where maybe you had it on your mind to talk to someone, even if it was simply just talking to them about Jesus, not necessarily presenting the whole gospel, simply having a spiritual conversation, and possibly we looked at them and said, man, I don't think they would receive it. Man, I don't know about that person. Looks pretty rough, right? I'm not saying put yourself in harm's way or anything of that nature. Listen, we live in a society, in a world today where there's a real reason why people are so guarded nowadays in comparison to years past, because we live in a very violent world. But nonetheless, everyone still needs the gospel, and we need to be willing to share the gospel with everyone, right? So good lessons to be learned in that. Let's continue forward, and we'll look at verses 5 and 6, if someone wants to go ahead and reread that for us.
He came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour.
Thank you, sir. Jesus overcame fatigue. He was wearied. It was about the 6th hour. Remember, he just made a fairly lengthy journey, and likely on foot. He was tired. He could have easily said, you know what, I'm calling it a day. his disciples, they're going to go to get food. We'll see that. He could have easily said, you know what, I'm going to lean up against, I guess at that time, a rock and take a little nap. Could have easily done that. He didn't. This might be one of the things that is a greater problem for us today than a lot of the other ones that we will discuss. Because listen, we go out, we work all day, we provide for our families, we put in a hard day's work. If you're a child of God, right, you ought to be the hardest worker at that job site. You work hard for your wages. You put on a smile. You do so with a good attitude. There's a lot of effort that goes into a child of God's work day. And by the time that day comes to a close, you're tired, right? Then we have other responsibilities that we have at home, and we have all these things that we fill our schedules with, and we are a very busy people. I mean, it's constantly, okay, well, now we're going to this. Well, now we're going to that. Well, tomorrow we go to this. Remember, we have this on Saturday. And our schedules are so full that we are pretty fatigued pretty often. Have you ever actually put in your schedule, and this steps all over my own toes, have you ever actually put in your schedule, you know what, this day between this time and this time, I'm going to go out and try and find somebody to talk to about Jesus. Or I'm going to go try and make a new friend that maybe I could reach the gospel to at some point. Right? We don't schedule those kind of things. This was not a scheduled thing necessarily, but Jesus knew what he was going to do. And nonetheless, when he got there, he was fatigued, and he was willing to go past that tiredness, past that fatigue, to share the gospel with somebody else. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I would assume that if we were being honest with ourselves on this point as we were the last, there's probably a lot more times in our life as a Christian that we thought, you know what, oh man, here's an opportunity. Man, I'm beat. Maybe it'll present itself again tomorrow. Man, I sure would like to talk with that person. I think we're on the right track to spark up good conversation, but man, I got to be at such and such place. Man, I got to get this done at home. Right? This one probably affects us more than anything else. Simply being so busy or simply being so tired from our busyness that we pass up opportunities and we miss the open doors when they're right there in front of us. Jesus was fatigued. The text is very clear about that. One man said that the most of the great things done in the world are done by tired people, because greatness requires sacrifice and hard work. Right? Great things are accomplished through people who are willing to put in long hours, willing to work even when they are fatigued. Somebody read for us Galatians chapter 6 and verse 10. Remember, we spoke even in the evangelism idea for the week about Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 9, about how we are to do good unto all people, especially those who are the household of faith. But now somebody read verse 10.
Therefore, we have opportunity, let us do good to all, especially to those who are of the household of faith.
Verse 10? Was that 10 or is that 9? What? Yeah, maybe I put the wrong verse. And let us not grow weary, or is that the next verse? Is that 11?
Verse 9.
9, okay, I had them flip-flop.
Not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart.
Thanks, sir. Do not grow weary while doing good, for in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. There's lots of work to do, and sometimes it's our own fatigue that keeps us from doing the work that could be done. You know, and you see it. You see fatigue in churches. You see fatigue in the eldership. You see fatigue in the deacons. You see fatigue in the preachers. You see fatigue in the members, because we all work. We all have things we do. We're constantly busy in this life, but we should not allow it to deter us from taking opportunity to share the gospel or get to know people to hopefully later be able to do the same. Johnny?
I'll say, found in a sermon outline I borrowed one time, it said, if you want something done, get a busy man to do it, and he'll make time.
Yeah. Right? I've heard similar things said like that. If you really want something done, find somebody who stays busy, and it'll get done, and it'll get done quick. In some of these, this material that was put together, they said heaven is a land of rest, but our community and our neighborhoods are a land of work. And we spoke of it yesterday, Revelation chapter 14 and verse 13. Blessed are those who die in the Lord, for they shall receive what? Rest, right? We will receive that rest from our good works, but the time now in the neighborhoods around us, the community around us, this is a time of work with great responsibility. And I don't know, if we think about it, but say we get there to the gates, we get there for the day of judgment. Are we going to be satisfied with the pedigree that we have produced, with the list of works that we have done through our life? Are we going to be satisfied with that to be met at the judgment? Or are we going to be asked, what about this opportunity? What about that opportunity? What about this opportunity? Where were you here? Right? Lots of work to be done. Effective evangelism is not a job, but rather a mission. And one Jesus understood wholeheartedly, one his apostles understood wholeheartedly. And somebody go ahead and read for us John chapter 9 and verse 4. John chapter 9 and verse 4. And again, just listen to the words of Jesus and the mindset when it came to this work and this responsibility.
Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, How is it that you being a Jew ask me for a drink?
Oh, 9:4, sir. 9:4.
9:4.
Yes, sir.
John 4?
John 9, verse 4.
We must work the works of him who sent me as long as it is day. Night is coming when no one can work.
Right, an emphasis on the time that we have now for that work that needs to be done. Because a time is coming, a night is coming when no one can work. John chapter 9 and verse 4, words of our Savior. All right, so as we've kind of walked into chapter 4, it's made mention of the work, even in verse 1, that was going on about these individuals being baptized. It's made mention that Jesus has left Judea and he has departed again for Galilee. It's recognized that there was purpose in this trip. He needed to go to Samaria. And when he gets to the city of Samaria and he comes upon this well and this individual is there, he's then going to begin to have this conversation, even though what we just noticed, he was very tired, he was weary, but he was still willing to do it. Somebody go ahead and read for us verse 7, or verse 6 and 7 of John 4.
Jacob came to his son Joseph, and Jacob's well was there. So Joseph, being weary from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about 6 hours. There came a woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus said to her, Give me a drink.
Thank you, sir. All right, so how did he begin? How did he start his work?
Talking to a stranger.
Talking to a stranger. That's not everybody's forte. Right? That's not what everybody enjoys doing. Some do. I think Chris Grota is probably always, and this may happen in every congregation all across Northeast Texas. I don't know. He seems to be the first one that people go to because he's never met a stranger in his life. And even if that person feels oddly uncomfortable that this random man has just come up and told them all about things, he loves doing it. He loves talking to people. He loves getting to know people, and he's good at it. Why do you suppose he's that good at it? He loves souls. What else? Practice. Right? We can't do something good or effectively if we don't practice at it. And he's a goofball, right? I mean, it all goes together. It works well. Listen, I kid you not, and this is a little self-reflection here. When I had heard from somebody else about how Chris Groda will talk to random strangers at a gas pump. I said, you know what, let's do this. So now when I'm at the gas pump and there's some random stranger, I will immediately strike up conversation just to get practice, right, in talking to people that I have no idea who they are, where they come from, or anything like that. And sometimes you can tell maybe they're a little bit like, why are you talking to me? But honestly, the majority of the time, they're happy, right? They're happy that you are, comfortable and want to just say, hey, how's your day? Right? So it does work. It is effective. Jesus comes up to this Samaritan woman, and I don't think it's hard for us to really catch his tone in just reading, right? You get a text message and you can very quickly say, oh, wow, that person's angry. Well, they weren't angry at all because you just can't tell the emotion through the text. It's hard for us to see the emotion in this, but I can't help but to think it was something said in kind words. It was something said with compassion. He didn't come up to her and say, hey, woman, get me a drink, right? That's not what we're talking about here. He would have been simply, could you give me a drink, right? Something of that nature. Johnny?
I'm going to say he did something that we are lacking in. He recognized opportunity. And took
Yeah.
advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, we talked about it. He came to seek and save that which is lost. I mean, when you say that, and this is what pops into my mind thinking about that, Jesus in his missionary work, all right, he wasn't walking across these, plains of Judea or the hills of Judea or whatever the case may be. He wasn't walking across those saying, man, I wonder how the Cowboys did today. Man, I wonder how such and such played out. I wonder how that, right? That wasn't what was on his mind. He was here to seek and save souls. He was constantly thinking about the next person that he was going to be able to talk to and talk to them about God. I understand we're busy, right? We have all kind of other things going on and our minds are distracted, but we should at least have in our mind every day, at different times throughout the day, souls, right? Johnny and then Aaron.
He started where she was at.
Sir?
Started talking to her about the physical water,
Uh-huh.
and then he goes into the spiritual.
Yes, right, and we'll get to that. You kind of see how his conversation plays out. It starts simply by asking a question that would not be offensive or anything of that nature. Now, we'll also look at her response and how it was somewhat kind of an offensive tone back, and we need to be ready for that. But he uses this speaking about just regular, everyday things to then transition into spiritual conversation, and we'll get to that also. Aaron?
And so, like, as you were saying, talk to somebody, we have to create our opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity is that people aren't just going to walk up and be like, hey, talk to me about Jesus.
Right.
We have to be the promoters of that.
Yeah.
It's like, I was out to eat with Christy at Brazos in Fort Worth on Friday night, and our waitress was really friendly and really nice. And I said, we're about to pray for our meal. Would you like
Yeah.
to pray for us? Is there something we can pray for you for?
Mm-hmm.
And she was ecstatic.
Yeah.
She was just ecstatic. This waitress, you could tell she's young. She's like, I would love that. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And was just, we have to create those
Yeah.
opportunities. And that's it. You're about to pray anyway.
Yeah.
Bring that person in.
Yep.
Because there's something we can pray for you. You never know, how that makes someone's day, that someone cares about them enough to, even though they're there to serve you, now you're serving them.
Right.
And we can create those opportunities. I mean, how many of us go out to eat somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Every time, ask your waiter if they would like to pray with you.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is that to do? You're about to pray anyway.
Yeah.
If they say no,
Yeah, it's
there
no big
goes
deal.
their tip.
Yeah, it's no big deal. Wow, there goes your tip.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well, you were doing real good until the
I'm
end.
just playing. But if they say yes, then what an opportunity that opens up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We can create those opportunities, and that's something we can do on a daily basis, is
Right.
create opportunities.
I know a couple that stopped at the Buc-ee's there in, where is that Buc-ee's located? What's the, Rockwall? Is it Rockwall? Okay. So they stop at that Buc-ee's, and there's a woman out in the parking lot, and she's trying to change her tire. And I can't remember exactly the details, but struggling to get the lug nuts off or something, I don't remember. And she was just obviously flustered. And, the couple goes up and asks if there's anything they can do to help, and offered to pray for her. And she was in tears, right? Just simply knowing somebody cared that much, one, to stop and ask if they could help, two, to say, is there anything we could do for you in prayer? Like, is there anything we could pray for you on your behalf? And of course, there was efforts in contacting the congregation there at Caddo Mills, where Jason Sparks is, and telling the person about that congregation. But it brought the person to tears. Just simply to your point, saying, can I pray for you? Offering a hand, but also saying, can I pray for you, right? Right, and it's taking a situation. What are we seeing here with Jesus when we continue in this text? What we're going to see with Jesus is this. He's going to take a regular conversation, something that's happening in the world right here around him, and he's going to take that and turn that to a spiritual conversation. Okay, so somebody stops and tries to help someone who's stranded on the side of the road. It's a regular conversation about regular everyday problems, and then you talk about prayer, and you talk about Jesus, and you turn it to a spiritual conversation, right? So we can follow, the pattern that's before us pretty easily in our day-to-day life. The dialogue that we'll see between Jesus and this woman is pretty well going to be, okay, well, Jesus said, she said, Jesus said, she said. It's going to kind of bounce back and forth like that. Well, one man said this. He said, Jesus opened the conversation. Jesus closed the conversation. He opened the conversation by asking a favor on a human level. He closed it by stating the supreme claim to messiahship. All right, so it began with a conversation that was something simply on a human level, a regular everyday conversation, and then that afforded him the opportunity then to lean into heavenly conversations, right? Spiritual conversations. Well, the questions that we might ask ourselves most, or at least think about, from time to time is, well, how do I approach somebody? And how from approaching somebody do I then get to that Bible study? Right? And maybe it's in our mind that, okay, well, here's an individual. I really want to get a study with this person. Ironically, the answer is don't immediately go up to that person and say, hey, you want to study the Bible? Because the odds are if you just immediately go up and say, hey, let's study the Bible, they're running for the hills. They don't know you. They have no idea who you are, what your motive is, or what your intent is. We live in a world, as spoken of earlier, of some very wicked people. And people are guarded, right, for good reason. We got to approach gently. Right? We have to be willing to use a little bit of wisdom in how we try and approach people. Somebody read Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 24 for us, please. Proverbs 18 and verse 24. We got to be willing to work on the friendships, right? We have to be willing to work on actually building a relationship with people so that we can get to know them well enough then to have those spiritual conversations. Proverbs 18 and verse 24.
A man who has friends must himself be friendly, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother.
All right, a man who has friends must himself be what? Friendly. If you want people to be friendly to you, what do you need to do to them? Be friendly, right? So work on the friend aspect first. Work into the spiritual conversations later. It's not that that effort and that desire and that purpose is not there. We just need to approach it with wisdom and start by trying to become someone's friend, taking opportunity to do something for them, and then work into those conversations. It's the pattern we see in Jesus. It's a pattern that we can continue to put to work in our own lives. Jesus did not initiate a conversation about religion, but about life. And he was obviously thirsty. We just talked about the fact that he was weary, right? He had just made this journey, and he asked for something that almost anyone would be willing to give. You ever thought about that? What he did request of her, it was well within her ability, well within where she was at to provide what he asked. I suppose that's part of the reason he asked for what he did. But also for the teaching point, talking about the living water, every bit of this was purposed, right? It needs to be purposed in our minds just the same. It was more or less an icebreaker that would allow deeper, more meaningful conversation to follow this regular, everyday conversation that he began with. One of Rob Whitaker's real famous little sayings, and I've heard it be repeated here by a number of people who have listened to him. People do not care
How much you know until they know
Yeah.
how much you care.
right? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Build the relationship, build the friendships if you really want to be effective in evangelism. Friendships and conversation are essential to successful evangelism, all right? We only have a couple of minutes. Thinking about this whole situation thus far, all right, Jesus has been busy. He's been working. He's been traveling. He's now worked his way to Samaria. He's came to a city there in Samaria where there is a well. He went with purpose. He was tired when he got there, but nonetheless, he was willing to engage with this person so that he could lead up into spiritual conversations. We'll pick up in the next time that we study this same material, looking at the next point, and look at how Jesus chose a time when others were not around. Right? He didn't pick a busy place, but rather a place where he could have a one-on-one conversation. Appreciate your attention. We'll pick up the next time.